Hey, what's going on? In this video, part 1 of 2, I'm going to be taking 3 raw files that I shot in the Cayman Islands and I'm going to be merging them together in Lightroom's HDR module to make this photo right here. And in part 2, I'm going to be taking the same 3 raw files and doing them in Aurora HDR 2019 to see which one's better, which one I like more. Alright, so this is the first part here where I'm going to take my 3 raw files from Lightroom and process these as an HDR right in Lightroom. So these are the 3 raw files. This would be my even exposure, sort of my down the middle one, and then obviously my underexposure and my overexposure. And I'm going to pre-process these before I merge them into HDR. That's just the way I started doing things, and when I go into the Aurora version of this, I'll show you why I used to do that, but why Aurora doesn't really support that anymore. Which I can't figure out. But anyway, shot I took in the Caymans a few months ago, and as you can see just from looking at the raw files, completely untouched. These are very bright, a lot of color, lots going on here. So they process pretty boldly. But anyway, I'm just going to go through and do kind of a basic retouch. Now this original raw file here, you could almost make the case that you don't even need to have a bracket. You could open this up and make a pretty impressive photo out of it. But because I've got the 3 files and I've got all the information, I'm not gonna do it like I normally would. So I'm gonna pull the highlights down almost all the way, open up the shadows a little bit. I basically process it kind of like halfway. I'm gonna do a little bit of a white point. I actually don't like doing my white point this way, where you hit Alt and bring up the black screen. I like hitting J and bringing up my clipping mask, because then I can see what I'm doing in real time to the picture. Blacks are fine. Not going to do anything here. Not going to add any additional contrast. Not going to do anything here. Not going to do anything here. I'll remove chromatic aberration, enable profile corrections, and I might just look at doing landscape. See, I think Adobe Landscape, it gives it a little bit too much color. It makes it pop just a little bit too much. So I'll leave it in Adobe Color. I don't want this to look super oversaturated, but as you can tell, the sky was crazy. Lots of pinks and everything. So now I'm going to go to my, obviously, underexposed photo for the sky. I'm actually going to open my highlights a little bit. I want that sky, it's probably a little bit too underexposed. I was shooting this the lazy way. I don't do HDRs the same way in camera anymore, but I haven't had an opportunity to shoot anything quite like this. So this was just, setting my camera up, setting my focus, and then, auto bracketing the timer, which I don't love anymore, because I think it's kind of lazy. You just sort of guess at your brackets. I kind of meter all the parts of the photo separately now, and it's all sort of part of, do I want to keep using Aurora, or do I want to look at maybe a different technique for blending? So I'm going to just decrease the clarity a little bit in the sky. I like soft skies. I like when they look kind of smooth and everything. I know a lot of people have been, will add a lot of structure and stuff to the sky. I just like to leave it kind of soft. There's a little bit of noise. I'll do denoising on the final image. Remove chromatic aberration, enable profile correction. Going to leave it in Adobe Color, and that's it. Now to the overexposed, I'm just going to pull down my highlights a little bit, just so we get a little bit more of a clear line here when it tries to put these together. I got the clouds back, and actually you could even probably recover this overexposed. Maybe not. I don't know, not worth it. Pull down my highlights. I will open up my shadows. I want to bring some of those rocks back in. I might warm this one just a touch. I'm trying to get some of that. I'll leave it. I don't need to mess with my black point. I will do clarity here, because I want to kind of make the details in these rocks come out just a little bit. So I'm going to add a little bit of clarity. And then I'll come down here and I will sharpen them just a little bit. So add a little bit of sharpening. I know they're already sharpened. I think Lightroom does a good job sharpening. And then I don't want to do too much, but you can see even with bracketing and even with this overexposure, there's still some noise down here in my shadows. I mean, that's just what I'm gonna get shooting on the camera that I have. It's an older crop sensor camera. It doesn't quite have the sensor that the newer cameras have. So click there and there. I'm not going to do any of the vignetting or cropping or leveling or anything until I merge these. So here's the 3 photos now. They've been a little bit retouched, and this is normally where I would kick them into Aurora, but instead I'm going to stay, where is it, right here, and I'm just going to do HDR. Now, if you've ever tried to do HDR in Lightroom, you'll notice a big difference is the tone mapping. That foreground is super dark. It just doesn't get it quite right. If I click auto settings, it recovers a little bit and it actually looks okay. So I don't do auto settings. I'm just going to go ahead and hit merge. And it doesn't normally take too long. So here's my merged HDR. Now, I process this kind of like I process a normal photo. In Aurora, I don't. So in Aurora, I rarely will go and grab and pull my highlights down and reopen up my shadows. But I don't know. So I'll open up my shadows a little bit. Turn my clipping mask back on. Add a little bit of a white. You can see, the clipping mask shows, if you don't know what I'm talking about, there's 2 ways to see, when you're blowing it out. So if I put my whites in the middle here and I hold down Alt and then click, it'll go black. And as soon as you start to see that color coming through, that's when you're clipping over here on your histogram. But you can't see the picture change in real time. So I hit J and turn on my clipping mask, and then instead of seeing the white, you see the red. So if I went by the Alt, that would be too much. So I like to use the clipping mask. There's my sky. I think the blacks look good. I kind of like dehaze sometimes. It does definitely darken the picture some. I don't think we really need it here. Not going to do anything here. I'll try a medium contrast curve. That looks okay. Might just pull my, there we go. What else? Because I'm recording myself, I'm very aware of everything that I'm doing. Luminance, I might pull back the blues in the sky a little bit. I don't really think we need any saturation here. Maybe a little bit in the blues. Split toning, I might try to do a little bit of split toning here and warm up my highlights a little bit. Maybe something like that, and then just do a little bit cooler in the shadows, something maybe a little bit like that. I don't really feel like I need to sharpen. Maybe a little bit. Go ahead and we'll add a little bit more sharpening. I just really want that to kind of live on these rocks. So I think that looks okay. And then I did 50 on the sharpening. So if you watch Serge Ramelli, he would tell you to do 50 on the noise reduction. A little bit choppy up here in the skies, but see, the whole photo is feeling really underexposed to me. Which makes me feel like I've got to open my shadows up all the way. But it's starting to look okay. Let's go ahead. Let's go ahead before I do too much more, and let's go ahead and crop it and level my horizon. So I just like to do on a shot like this a 16:9 crop. And probably put my horizon sort of right in the middle. Leave these rocks in here, kind of keep this guy down here. And then these ones are kind of tricky to level sometimes because you almost have to, it looks pretty good. You almost have to level it based on sort of the visual lines, not the horizon.
I almost feel like I could just leave it as is. Maybe come down a little bit. See how that looks. So something like that. I don't really like the way the foreground looks. I don't feel like it came up very well. I might warm the picture a little bit overall. Just give it a little bit more warmth. Play with contrast. Oh, so, maybe something like this as I kind of work on it. See the before and the after. Yeah, I think it's kind of a cool photo. The more I toggle between the before and the after, I feel like I don't want the shadows quite as open. You want it to look somewhat natural. I mean, this is darker down here. You're looking at the sun. The sun's kind of hitting up in the sky. You're losing the light in your foreground. So maybe I warmed it too much. So something like that. I'll probably mess with this a little bit more, but this is, kind of the first touch that I would do and then come back and look at it, see what I like and don't like. But for example's sake, I think this is okay. I might toss a little bit of a vignette on this, but it gives you an idea for what we're doing in terms of the colors, in terms of the saturation, in terms of what everything looks like, especially down here in the rocks. Just the color tone on the rocks, does this look natural? Does it look real? Does it look, do the colors look fake? But so that's the Lightroom retouch. Before I kind of put it away and go finish up my work for the day, and finish up my work for the morning, and then eventually come back and do this again in Luminar, I just felt like the photo was falling kind of flat. I felt like it was missing something here, like we weren't really getting the impact of the sun coming onto this water. So I wanted to try to do something with a, what do you call this, a radial mask, just to kind of make the light pop not only here on the horizon, but also that kind of comes down here into the water. So see if this works. So I just grab a radial mask, something like that, and I'm going to kind of put it on the middle. I'm going to invert it. So when I invert it, it only shows, it's only in the middle. I'll leave the feather where it is, maybe pull it up. And so I'm going to add a little bit of exposure, a little bit of warmth, maybe a little bit of magenta, and see the before and the after. And I kind of like what it's doing there to the sky on the horizon, but also down here in the water. I think it's giving it just a little bit more pop, but it looks super weird here on the rocks. That's definitely unnatural. So I'm gonna try, let's go range mask, luminance, show luminance mask. Boop. So this is it. This is everything that I'm applying. And so from here, I might back off the feather. If you back off the feather all the way, it looks ridiculous. But bring the feather maybe like somewhere like that. And basically all I want is this effect, this mask, whatever, to be in the sky and in the water, not so much on the rocks. Now it doesn't have to be perfectly off the rocks, but lighting the rocks is super unnatural because it's basically saying there's a light source here, which there isn't. So if you go down here to the range, this will be the highlight side, I believe, and this is the shadow side. I don't technically know what I'm talking about here. This is just from doing this before. So if I grab this range slider and move it, it should, yeah. So there, it's taking it off the rocks. Now, it doesn't have to be completely perfect. And I believe I can also grab a brush and do this. If I go to brush, I can erase it. So let's just see what this looks like. Let's turn this luminance mask off. And then I think that looks pretty good. I mean, there's a couple different ways you can do that. You can put this on there, and then you can grab the brush and then just hit Alt and then paint it out. But I don't know, I kind of like using this little technique here. This is relatively new, I think, for Lightroom, where you can just get rid of it. As you can see, it's still on there a little bit. There's a little bit of red in there, not too much. I think it did a pretty good job. But yeah, I don't know. I think that might that might have helped add just a little bit of extra punch to this photo. I just felt like the water in here wasn't really capturing that reflection from the sky. So I just wanted to do that, and I think now I'm done. I'm going to go ahead and just leave this alone. And then next will be part 2, again in Aurora. Same 3 original raw files pre-processed into Aurora, see what kind of look I get there, and then ultimately we're going to compare what's better, the Lightroom version, the Aurora version, or what you think is better or whatever. And that's it. Thanks.